Someone killed my wife. You might find it hard to believe, but it's a true story. I am writing this, and it's as true as the fact that I will die tomorrow morning. Yes, this story concludes with my own death tomorrow. I have always been a kind and loving person, and everyone can vouch for that. People will also tell you that I have always loved animals more than anything since I was a little boy. My family always had various animals around the house, and as I grew up, I spent most of my time taking care of them, feeding them, and keeping them clean. I got married at a young age, and I was delighted to discover that my wife shared the same love for our animal friends as I did. She even bought us the most magnificent animals. We had a variety of pets, including birds, goldfish, a wonderful dog, and a beautiful, large black cat. This cat was incredibly intelligent, and its black fur covered its entire body. My wife used to find it amusing how some people believe that all black cats are wicked creatures in disguise, like the character Pluto. The cat's name was Pluto, and he was my favorite. I was the one who always fed him, and he would follow me wherever I went. Sometimes I had to prevent him from following me out into the streets. For many years, we lived happily together, being the best of friends. However, during that time, I started to change gradually. It was the destructive influence of alcohol, that evil enemy of mankind, which was altering my personality. I transformed from the kind and loving person that people knew before. I became increasingly selfish and would get unreasonably angry over trivial matters. I started using foul language, especially towards my wife. There were even instances when I would physically harm her. At that point, I began to engage in terrible acts towards our other animals, hiding them away, except for Pluto. My illness, which was alcoholism, was deteriorating rapidly. Yes, alcoholism is an illness. Soon enough, I began to harm my beloved Pluto as well. I remember that night vividly when I returned home late, heavily intoxicated once again. I couldn't comprehend why Pluto wasn't happy to see me. He kept his distance from me. In my drunken state, I caught hold of him and gripped him tightly. He was afraid and bit my hand. Suddenly, I lost control of myself. It was as if someone else, someone evil and driven by alcohol, had taken over my body. I took out my knife from my pocket, held the poor animal by his neck, and cruelly gouged out one of his eyes. The next morning, I woke up filled with immense pain and horror. I deeply regretted my actions and couldn't fathom how I could have done something so wicked. However, alcohol soon aided in numbing my remorse, while Pluto slowly recovered from his injuries. Gradually, Pluto ceased to feel any pain. Instead, there remained an unsightly, dry cavity where his eye used to be. He resumed his usual movements around the house. However, he never approached me anymore, and he would flee whenever I got too close. I knew he no longer loved me. Initially, it saddened me, but over time, anger began to consume me, leading me to commit another dreadful act. I felt compelled to do it, unable to control myself, despite the profound sorrow in my heart. Deep down, I was aware of its wickedness, yet that very awareness compelled me to carry it out. Yes, I did it because I knew it was evil. In a horrific act, I captured the cat and hanged him by his neck from a tree until he perished. That very night, I abruptly woke up to discover that my bed was engulfed in flames. I could hear people outside shouting about the fire, urging others to take notice. Our house was ablaze. Fortunately, my wife and our servant managed to escape unharmed. We stood there, witnessing the house being reduced to ashes. Nothing remained of the structure by morning. All the walls had crumbled during the night, except for one lone wall situated in the center of the house. I soon realized the reason behind this particular wall's survival. It had recently been plastered, and the plaster was still moist. To my surprise, a crowd had gathered around the wall, engaging in animated conversation. Intrigued, I approached and peered over their shoulders. To my utter horror, I saw the outline of a large cat hanging by its neck, etched in the fresh white plaster. It took me several minutes to regain my composure and think coherently again. I understood that I needed to understand why it was there. I recollected that I had hung the cat in the garden of the neighboring house during the fire. The garden was crowded with people, and it's likely that someone had removed the lifeless cat from the tree and tossed it through the window, attempting to rouse me from my intoxicated state. As the collapsing walls pressed against the cat's body, it became embedded in the fresh plaster. The cat burned entirely, leaving behind the black shape within the newly plastered wall. I was certain that this was what had occurred, yet I couldn't shake the image of that black silhouette for months. It haunted my dreams. Over time, I began to feel a sense of sorrow for losing the cat, prompting me to search for another one. I focused my search primarily on the impoverished areas of our town, where I often frequented for drinking. One night, while sitting in a dim and grimy drinking establishment, I noticed a black object atop a cupboard, positioned near some wine bottles. I was taken aback by the sight before me. I distinctly recalled looking at those wine bottles just a few minutes earlier, and I was certain that the object on top of the cupboard hadn't been there. Intrigued, I stood up and approached to examine it. As I reached out and touched it, I realized it was a black cat, much like Pluto. This cat resembled Pluto in every way, except for one notable difference. While Pluto had no white fur on his body, this cat possessed a large white patch on its chest. When I made contact with the cat, it rose and affectionately rubbed the side of its head against my hand repeatedly. It seemed to have taken a liking to me. This was the exact animal I had been searching for, and he continued to display a friendly demeanor. Later, when I left the drinking establishment, he followed me onto the streets. Remarkably, he accompanied me all the way back home. We had a new house, and upon entering, he promptly settled himself on the most comfortable chair and fell asleep. He decided to stay with us, naturally endearing himself to both of us, particularly becoming my wife's favorite pet. However, as the weeks went by, an inexplicable dislike towards the cat started to grow within me. I cannot explain why, but I detested the way he displayed affection towards me. Gradually, this dislike transformed into genuine hatred, although I made sure to never mistreat the cat. Indeed, I was extremely cautious in my treatment of the cat, keeping my distance due to the memories of what I had done to my dear Pluto. Additionally, my hatred for the cat intensified because he only had one eye. I noticed this the morning after he had come home with me. Naturally, my wife's affection for him only grew stronger as a result. However, the more I despised the cat, the more it seemed to adore me. He incessantly trailed behind me, often getting in my way. Whenever I took a seat, he would invariably position himself underneath my chair. Frequently, he would attempt to leap onto my lap, and I would feel an overwhelming desire to harm him, though I managed to restrain myself. The memory of what I had done to Pluto served as a deterrent, but there was also an underlying fear I harbored towards the cat. Describing this fear is challenging, as it wasn't a typical fear of something malevolent. Yet, gradually, this peculiar fear transformed into a profound horror that consumed me. Yes, horror indeed. If I were to tell you the reason behind my fear, you would likely dismiss it as madness. Several times, my wife showed me the white patch on the cat's chest. She claimed that the shape had been gradually changing over a long period of time. Initially, I didn't believe her, but as weeks went by, I started to observe the transformation myself. The shape of the cat's chest was indeed changing. Its contours were becoming more and more defined, resembling an object. After a few more weeks, I finally recognized what the shape represented. It was unimaginable, and I feel a great deal of trepidation in even mentioning it. The cat bore the shape of that dreadful instrument of agony and death, the gallows. It was indeed the dreaded gallows, a symbol of pain and death. I had lost all understanding of happiness and peace. Throughout the day, the cat remained constantly by my side, never leaving my presence. At night, he would disturb my sleep, waking me up almost every hour. I recall awakening from dreadful nightmares, only to find the cat sitting close to my face, its weight burdening my heart. I had undergone a profound transformation, becoming an entirely different person. There was not even a trace of goodness remaining within me. I was consumed by wicked and malevolent thoughts, the darkest and most evil thoughts imaginable. Hatred enveloped me, extending towards everyone and everything, including my dear wife. On one occasion, she accompanied me to the cellar to gather some firewood. We could no longer afford to employ a servant. As we descended the stairs, the cat followed closely behind, almost causing me to stumble. This infuriated me to such an extent that I grabbed an axe and attempted to leave the cat in two. However, as I swung the axe downward, my wife intervened, halting my arm with her hand. This act only fueled my anger further, prompting me to forcibly remove her hand from my wrist. In a fit of rage, I raised the tool once more and brought it down with tremendous force, mercilessly burying it into the top of her head. I was faced with the daunting task of concealing my wife's body, fully aware that I couldn't remove it from the house unnoticed, as the neighbors had already taken notice of the situation. I contemplated various methods, including dismembering and burning the body, burying it in the cellar floor, throwing it into the nearby river, or placing it in a wooden box to be taken outside. Eventually, I decided to hide the body in one of the cellar walls. The old building, situated close to the river, had damp walls with soft plaster. I knew that beneath the new plaster on one particular wall, there was a weak section. The wall was notably thick, providing an opportunity to conceal the body in its midst. It wasn't a challenging task to remove some plaster, extract a few stones, and create a cavity within the wall. I carefully placed my wife's body inside, restored the stones, applied fresh plaster, and covered the wall once again, ensuring everything appeared undisturbed. Nobody would ever suspect anything had happened. Following that, I proceeded upstairs with the intention of killing the cat, as I believed it brought me ill fortune. I searched everywhere but couldn't locate the animal. I was convinced that it had become too cunning to approach me due to my wife's murder. From that point on, I waited throughout the evening, yet the sinister cat never returned. It didn't reappear during the night either. For the first time in a long while, I experienced a peaceful sleep. When I woke up the following morning, I noticed with surprise that the cat was still absent. 2 to 3 days went by, and there was still no sign of the cat. I cannot express how elated I felt. I started to feel immensely better without the presence of the cat. It was clear to me that he had been the source of all my unhappiness. Without him, I began to regain a sense of freedom, feeling like a liberated man once again. It was truly wonderful, knowing that I would never have to deal with the cat again. Several individuals inquired about my wife, but I easily responded to their questions. On the 4th day, the police arrived. I remained unconcerned as they conducted a thorough search of the house. They requested my presence as they combed through every inch multiple times, eventually proceeding to the cellar. I accompanied them without a trace of fear. Calmly, I observed their search, fully confident that they would find nothing. And indeed, they found nothing. Soon enough, they concluded their investigation and prepared to leave. I was overcome with joy, unable to contain my excitement as they ascended the stairs. I spoke without fully comprehending my words, expressing pleasantries to the officers. "Good day to you, dear sirs. This is indeed a well-built old house, isn't it?" "Yes, a very well-built old house." "These walls, gentlemen, these walls are strong, aren't they?" I struck the part of the wall where my wife was concealed with a forceful blow. To my astonishment, a voice responded from inside the wall, an eerie cry akin to that of a child. Swiftly, the cry escalated into a prolonged scream filled with anguish and horror. I witnessed the policemen standing on the stairs, their mouths agape. Suddenly, they rushed down in great haste, determined to dismantle the wall. It crumbled swiftly, revealing my wife's lifeless form within. She bore the marks of dried blood on her head, her gaze fixed upon them. And there, perched upon her head, stood the cat, its crimson mouth wide open in a shriek. One golden eye glowed like fiery embers. The cunning creature, my wife's demise was due to its influence. And now, its malevolent voice condemned me to face the gallows.